The snow fell like ash when Ethan Cole wandered back into the Blue Ridge Mountains, every flake whispering reminders of a life he'd tried to bury. He'd been gone 30 years, but the trail, though nearly swallowed by time, still knew his name. His boots crunched through the frozen silence until the old cabin emerged, half sunk beneath ivy and rot. It was smaller than he remembered, though somehow more alive, breathing in the cold air that seeped through its broken windows. Inside, dust motes floated like lost souls, disturbed by the flicker of his lantern. He traced the familiar grooves in the floorboards, the ones his father carved by hand when the world was still simple. Then creak. A loose plank gave way under his boot. He knelt, pried it open, and something metallic winked in the darkness. A hidden compartment. Inside, a faded photograph and a worn leather journal. The photo showed 3 faces: a bearded man, a woman with kind eyes, and a small boy in her lap. Ethan's breath caught. "Mom," he whispered. Sarah Cole, the ghost who'd haunted every silence of his childhood. Ethan sat on the cold wooden floor, staring at the photograph as the lantern's flame trembled. The cabin's air was thick with memory, the smell of pine, sawdust, and sorrow. His father, Robert Cole, had been a craftsman, a man who shaped beauty from raw wood, yet never mended the cracks in his own heart. After Sarah's death, the house had grown colder with every passing season. "Your mother would have loved this," his father used to mutter before falling silent again, the grief too heavy to name. Ethan learned young that some questions didn't deserve asking. Now at 53, his hands were calloused like his father's, his back scarred by decades of construction and consequence. He'd built homes for strangers but lost his own. Marriage, daughter, everything. He'd run from this place to escape becoming his father. But here he was, sitting in the ruins of the same house, clutching the same ghosts. He turned over the old pocket watch Robert had once tried to give him. Stuck at 4:17, forever. "Just like me," he murmured. Tomorrow he'd open the journal. Tonight he'd sleep beside the past he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Morning light crept through cracked windows, slicing the dust into ribbons. Ethan rubbed his eyes, unzipped the journal, and began to read. The first entry was dated June 14th, 1994. "Jay suspects something," it read. "He says we must be careful," he frowned. The initials, E and J, appeared again and again, alongside hints of secret meetings, cash withdrawals, and fear. Then he found a full name, Eleanor Whitaker. Ethan froze. He remembered the stories. Senator James Whitaker's wife, who had vanished without a trace 30 years ago. The journal's final entries turned desperate, meeting E tonight at the cabin. If she doesn't arrive by midnight, something's gone wrong. The page after that was torn out. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. His father had been in love with a married woman, Eleanor, the woman who disappeared the same night his father's life fell apart. His hand shook as he turned the final page and found a small brass key taped inside the back cover, engraved with a single letter, W. Whitaker. It fit perfectly between guilt and mystery, and Ethan's gut told him his father had died keeping something far darker than an affair. By mid-morning, the mountain silence was broken by the crunch of tires on snow. Ethan peered through the cracked window as a black SUV pulled up beside his rusted truck. The sheriff stepped out, a tall man, sharp-featured, eyes cold as steel. "Ethan Cole," he called. "Mind if I come in?" The badge on his jacket read David Whitaker. The name hit Ethan like a stone in the chest. The son of that Whitaker, the powerful senator his father's journal had feared. The sheriff's voice was calm, rehearsed. "Heard you were back. My father's interested in this property. Shame to see it rot." Ethan forced a nod, his pulse hammering. "This place isn't for sale." Whitaker smiled thinly. "Everything's for sale." When he left, Ethan's hands were trembling. Something about the man's eyes, calculating, too familiar, told him he wasn't there to negotiate. That night, Ethan searched the cabin again. Behind his father's old desk, he found a folder of newspaper clippings, every one about Eleanor Whitaker's disappearance. Her smiling face stared up from the yellowed pages, frozen in time. And suddenly Ethan realized his father hadn't been mourning love. He'd been mourning guilt, or perhaps a crime he couldn't prove. The next day, Ethan followed a hand-drawn map hidden among the clippings. It led him through waist-deep snow to the grandfather oak, a massive tree at the edge of the property where his father used to take him for picnics. "Look under the oak," the letter in the journal had said. Digging through the frozen earth, Ethan uncovered a small waterproof box. Inside, surveillance notes, times, vehicle descriptions, evidence. His father had been tracking Senator Whitaker's movements, documenting clandestine deliveries to remote mountain sites. As Ethan studied the entries, a figure moved at the edge of the woods. Someone was watching. He returned to the cabin to find an old truck parked out front. A man stepped out, gray-bearded in uniform. "Mike Donovan," he said. "Been a long time, Ethan." His childhood best friend, now a deputy. But Mike's smile faded quickly. "You need to leave tonight," he warned. "Sheriff Whitaker's not here to buy the land. He's looking for something your father hid." Then quietly, "Your dad didn't die from cancer. The autopsy was falsified. I saw the report before it disappeared." The truth struck like lightning. His father had been murdered to keep a secret buried. That night, Mike returned with a flash drive and an old compass, Robert Cole's final gift. Hidden inside the compass was a micro SD card, proof of decades of corruption. The Whitakers had run an empire of deceit, illegal chemical dumping, money laundering, and political cover-ups. Eleanor had discovered it and died trying to expose them. The sheriff's men surrounded the cabin before dawn. Gunfire shattered the quiet. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who'd once cared for Ethan as a boy, appeared through the storm and led them to an escape route, a tunnel that ran beneath the mountain, built during Prohibition. "Your father mapped these tunnels," she whispered. "He knew this day would come." They crawled through darkness as the cabin above them burned. The mountain trembled with collapsing stone, but Ethan kept the drive and journal close, his heart pounding with a single truth. The Whitakers had killed his mother, his father, and Eleanor, but they hadn't buried him yet. Hours later, Ethan clawed his way out through a ventilation shaft, gasping under a cold sky. He was beyond the county line, alive but hunted. Sheriff Whitaker found him among the trees, gun raised, face twisted with rage. "You think this ends with you?" he spat. "We own this land." "We own you." Ethan stared him down. "Not any more." Whitaker's finger tightened on the trigger, but another gun fired first. The sheriff collapsed, shock frozen in his eyes. Behind him stood Mike Donovan, wounded but alive. "Guess I still owe you one," he rasped. Sirens wailed in the valley below as dawn broke over the ridge. The collapse of the mine had revealed everything: chemical barrels, documents, bones. Within weeks, federal agents swarmed the mountains. Senator James Whitaker confessed on his deathbed. His son, Sheriff David Whitaker, lived, but only to face trial. The crimes of a dynasty, unearthed by the man they'd tried to destroy. And as the headlines screamed of scandal and corruption, Ethan Cole simply watched the sunrise over the mountain his family had once lost. 6 months later, autumn painted the valley in gold. The Cole cabin stood rebuilt, the smell of cedar and sawdust filling the crisp morning air. Ethan worked on the porch railing, his father's tools spread beside him, the same tools that once carved secrets into wood, now building something honest again. His daughter Emily arrived, hesitant but smiling. Together, they walked to the grandfather oak, where 2 new headstones stood side by side. Robert and Sarah Cole, finally at peace. Beneath the oak, They buried a small metal box containing the locket, Sarah's ring, and a note marked for the next generation. "So they remember," Ethan said softly, his voice trembling with both grief and grace. As they stood together, hand in hand, the wind carried the scent of pine through the valley. For the first time in decades, the mountain was quiet, not with secrets but with peace. And for those listening now, the narrator's voice lowers to a haunting whisper. Remember, truth doesn't stay buried forever. Some stories, no matter how deep they're hidden, will always find their way back to the light.